Welcome back to this channel where we focus on motorcycle operation safety, mainly at slow speed motorcycle operations. Today I wanted to just chat briefly about the importance of the clutch and the use of the clutch in slow speed motorcycle operations. Because when it comes down to it, really the focus of your skills comes in, and it should become second nature, the feel of the friction zone, knowing where your friction zone is on your motorcycle, and knowing how to keep your throttle loaded to the appropriate speed. So on a very basic fundamental level, your clutch, of course, is the device, the instrument that you use for disengaging, on a more technical level, I guess, disengaging the engine from the rear wheel. Pull the clutch all the way in, doesn't go anywhere in first gear. Let the clutch out, it goes. You get that basic concept. Well, when you're doing slow speed operations, as opposed to on the road, normal driving speed, 20 miles an hour above, you're never, on slow speed operations, you never fully extend. You never have the clutch fully out, generally speaking. Say 10 miles an hour below when you're doing U-turns or right turns, left turns, whatever. You never have the clutch fully out, generally speaking. You're always, you do have sometimes fully in, but not normally. Usually you're partially out in what they call the friction zone. And that friction zone is where your clutch first begins to engage the rear wheel and provide a little bit of power. You can find that friction zone by starting your engine, actually let's just do this. You can find that friction zone by putting your motorcycle in first gear, clutch in first obviously, put your motorcycle in first gear, and then let your clutch out just ever so slowly, and you'll feel the motorcycle lurch forward a little bit. That's the start of your friction zone. Most slow speed motorcycle operations will be at that start of the friction zone or a little bit into it. So here I'll show you with mine. So here I'm idling. Clutch is all the way in. As I let it out slowly, right about there is where my friction zone starts. You can see the bike begin to move. When I'm doing slow speed motorcycle operations, I will always be right about there or a little more, barely in the friction zone, never fully out. Because when you let the clutch fully out, you're fully engaging the rear wheel, and that can be extremely difficult at slow speeds. So what I wanted to show you today, actually I forgot to show you this part of it. So I'm in the friction zone, and when I'm doing a slow speed operation, you'll hear my throttle up just slightly, because as I begin to go into that friction zone, you can see the motorcycle move again. Well, I'm generally going to go into a little further, and watch what happens when I go into it further. You hear that? My idle starts to drop, and I'm pulling my front brake because I want to make sure I stay in the picture. I'll take care of my front brake. If I let the clutch out too quickly, you can hear it dropping. In fact, I'm not going to throttle up at all. Watch it happen. Almost died. In fact, can't make it die. But the point is, when you're letting your clutch out slowly, you can be in the danger zone with your throttle. You will be in the danger zone with your throttle because your engine will die, it will go down. If your engine dies while you're in a turn, you're probably going to drop the bike. So what do you want to do? Load it. Hear my engine just slightly drop up or come up. That's all I got to do is let it out, and I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to drop my light. So running my engine with the garage door closed to shut it off for now. It's all right, I'm going to open up in a minute. Because I also want to show you how this applies, this friction zone And the balancing of the throttle applies in slow speed maneuvers. And it's not just U-turns, it's not just when you're leaning, it's when you're straight up and down, or straight up with the bike. And I'm going to show you a couple of quick examples of how that matters. So here I am outside the house, outside the garage. And usually when I pull out of the garage, I back out because I have to pull in, and I can explain on another video, but when I back out, I back onto the sidewalk. And as you can see, if there's an obstacle on the side of the driveway, in this case my truck, I don't want to keep my feet down and try to turn down that driveway. Because what happens if I have to hit my brake because somebody's walking down the sidewalk? My handlebars are turned, I'm probably going to drop the bike. So here's the easy way to do it. Use your friction zone, turn your handlebars. Of course, you already have your head and eyes to where you want to go. Be on that rear brake. And they don't have to be right at the edge of the driveway, at the sidewalk. I could back up if I needed to, but I'm okay here. I'm going to use my rear brake and I'm going to look where I'm going. I'm going to ease into it. Just to show you again, I backed up into my sidewalk that I usually go into. Now I'm looking on one side. I can't actually see around my truck, so that's why I'm using my rear brake to slow down. Now I'm going to come around down here, and somebody's coming along, so I'm going to stop there. There you go. So I demonstrated them yesterday, but a little bit of change of plans. I think I'm going to show you how to work on them first, because you kind of got the idea from this example I showed yesterday, and I'll show a few more out in the parking lot here. But first I want to show how probably a couple of the easiest ways to work on that particular. So let's start with the first example, or first way of working on, a method of getting more familiar with the balance between the friction zone and the throttle. I'm about to show you, demonstrate for you an exercise that'll help teach your brain to understand, or to get a whole lot more familiar with that friction zone and how to use the friction zone. As to, probably some of you may not have heard this exercise before, but I've seen it before, but I do know that Robert Simmons on his channel talks a lot about this exercise. He calls it Trust and Believe, and I can link to that particular trademarked exercise. But regardless of that, this exercise, for lack of a better term, is a fantastic way to get your brain familiar with the use of the friction zone. So as I said yesterday, you can find your friction zone by letting your clutch out just slightly, far enough where you feel your bike moving a little bit. There's the start of my friction zone right there. And if I go more into it, I'll go more forward. You get the idea. There's my friction zone. So, I guess one of the quickest ways and most effective ways to get used to that friction zone is to do this exercise. Find that point where you're just starting to move, like right there for me, then back off just a hair, just enough where you're not moving anymore. And I make sure I'm in first gear first, because we always make sure we're in first gear in slow speed exercise. And then I cover my rear brake, which I guess technically means if you need to press on your brake because you're rolling, then do that. But we're not in the friction zone. We're just in front of it. And remember, our focus right now is to learn how to use that friction zone. And part of that, or the initial part of that, is to learn where it is. So right now, I find my friction zone right there. I'm backing out of it just a little bit. So now I'm going to cover on my rear brake. I'm going to bring my throttle up just a little bit. And just bringing up the throttle is for the purpose of having regards to the power there when I need it. So anyway, I get my throttle, I'm going to lift my foot, and then I'm going to go right into that friction zone when I feel myself falling. Therefore, I'm going to start learning where my friction zone is. That's it right there for me. Try that again. Friction zone, and where it is and how to use it. Right there for me, and I'll back off a little bit, so my hand knows where it is, my brain knows where it is. Now I have to train it how to use it. Again, this. Training my brain to go into that friction zone and use it and balance it with the throttle. And the really amazing thing, or rather really convenient thing about this particular exercise is not only is it training your brain to know where the friction zone is on the motorcycle and how to use it, it's also training you to pick your foot up off the floor and keep it on the footboards. Just kind of a byproduct, I like that, of this exercise. Very good, right there for me. I'm going to back off a little bit. And actually, I keep on looking at my lever, there's no need for that. I'm going to slow the camera, I can feel the friction zone. I lay it out, there it is right there. I'm going to back it back in, lift my throttle, so I have plenty of power when I rev up. And that's how you use your friction zone. That's just one example. So now a little bit get a different camera angle. I'm going to show you another exercise that will help you get comfortable, more familiar with where your friction zone is, or maybe I should say where it starts with your clutch, and how to use it and how to balance it with your throttle. In this exercise, I'm going to be using the rear brake again, just to help control my speed. But the focus right now is you can use this exercise for understanding where your throttle, or where your friction zone is and how to use it. Some people know it as a slow ride, so there's maybe lots of people that would hear that term and say, oh, that's what you're about to do. Well, it's an excellent exercise for learning the friction zone. So here we go. And even this time, I'm going to do it just like I did with the previous exercise. And I'm going to find the friction zone first. So I'm going to, oh, there it is for me. I don't have to do it that way with the slow ride, but I'm just going to keep it the same. I'm going to be on my rear brake to control my speed. But again, that's not the point of it I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to show you how to control that friction zone. And as I roll along very slowly, like less than 1 mile an hour hopefully, controlling my speed by rear brake again, I'm going to stay in that friction zone and try to keep my throttle at a somewhat level, I guess you'd say, somewhat same spot all the way through, and play with that friction zone. Actually, once I find it, I want to keep it there. I want to keep where the friction zone position is. So here we go. For the slow ride, find the friction zone, there it is, with my throttle, just so I have the power in the rear wheel, the power available to go to the rear wheel, and we start. There's my friction zone, I'm using it to go slowly. If I had my clutch all the way out, that wouldn't work for this exercise. Now, another way you can work on the friction zone, if you're feeling slightly uncomfortable with either one of those particular exercises, is, and I'll be careful about saying this because I'm not a fan of putting your feet down when your motorcycle's moving, your feet stay on the boards. However, if you feel uncomfortable with those two exercises in any way, it's perfectly okay to start with this particular one. This is what I started with many years ago. So, again, I think it's unsafe to keep your feet on the ground if your bike is moving, except in this one condition. If I'm feeling like very unsafe or very uncomfortable, I guess, with those previous exercises, I'll let my clutch out a little bit, and I don't want my engine to die, so I'm going to lift the throttle, and I feel that. I feel that moving right there. I feel it moving. I don't know if you can see me moving, but there we go. I'm feeling it just moving just a little bit. That's finding my friction zone. And some people might call this duck walking. That's fine. I'm not really going anywhere, so I'm just kind of sitting here and feeling that friction zone. We're going in and out of it. But once you find that friction zone, sitting here and keeping your feet on the floor, on the ground, there's then time, once you find it, there's then time to put your foot up on the board and go. From talking to some other folks in relatively recent past, I have heard some people say that getting out in the cone practice, getting out on the cone course and practicing is really all you need to be able to understand the friction zone and learn how to use it. And really, while I agree that getting out on the cone course and just going around the cones, doing a U-turn, doing any sort of other normal, the cone weave, whatever, while I agree that those do help you learn the friction zone, sometimes it's a little easier, well, sometimes you learn it quicker if you really focus on exercises, or rather, if you do exercises that focus on learning that friction zone. And as much as doing circles or U-turns or cone weaves uses the friction zone, it's not only what it uses. There are other techniques involved in that. So doing an exercise that focuses on the friction zone, to me, is very helpful. And that's why I really like the first exercise I just showed you. That one exercise, the first one I showed you, is one of the most prevalent in my mind that really helps you learn the friction zone. So that being said, it is true that getting out on the cone course does help you with the friction zone. Of course, it helps you with all the techniques that you work on and whatever exercise you're going to do. My point is just do exercises that will focus on what you need to do. Yesterday, I talked about how important the friction zone is, knowing how to use it, knowing where it is and how to use it. And now I'm going to show you why. I demonstrated getting out of the garage yesterday. Well, I demonstrated getting off my driveway yesterday. That's one reason, or another, one example of why it's useful. Another one is simple U-turns. So as most people would know, most skilled riders, most skilled slow-speed riders would know, doing an 18-foot U-turn is really not necessary in everyday riding. It's a lot of fun for those of us who know how to do it and are proficient enough. But say a 24, 22-foot, those are fine. You can do a 24 or 22-foot U-turn, even a 27-foot, which is probably a little wide for a normal city road. Regardless, that particular skill set, you probably know this already, but it uses the friction zone. So when you're approaching the U-turn, you're going into the friction zone. You're slowing your bike down to probably 8 miles an hour, or a little less, maybe 7 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour, something like that. Going into your friction zone, putting your head and eyes where they're supposed to be behind you because you're doing a U-turn, but you're using your friction zone throughout that exercise. If you let your clutch fully out, doing a U-turn will be very difficult. I mean, I might even, I'm curious if I can try that. You know what, it's been a long time since I've tried to do a U-turn with not in the friction zone. Let's see how it works for me. Right here is fully extended, no friction zone usage. And that is, I have very little control. I feel very wobbly. Now here is a U-turn friction zone. Actually, really U-turn, to give you the idea. My point today was just to demonstrate the usefulness of the friction zone and how to learn to use it. How to learn where it is and the best method of learning to use it. So that's really all I had for this particular segment of videos. Actually, this is a parking lot we practice. I think I mentioned that earlier. I came out here. We're going to try to do some practicing today, but the folks who were going to practice with some family stuff came up, and I am all about saying family is priority, so totally understand. but it made for an awesome opportunity to share some of the exercises for learning to use the friction zone properly. Thanks for joining, guys. Something I forgot to mention, and this is just kind of administrative stuff. Lots of folks probably are quite aware, YouTube people who watch YouTube are quite aware of the function of subscribing to a channel. But for those of the folks who might not be aware, they just happened across, they did a search for motorcycle slow speed training or whatever and found this channel. It actually would help you out, and maybe this, I'm not familiar enough with the YouTube operations and whatnot, but if you click the subscribe button, you will actually be notified when new videos come out from this channel. Click that subscribe button and you'll do yourself and maybe even me a favor. All right, thanks.